gentlemen, the goose is once again loose. Welcome back to the increasingly familiar surroundings of Monty's War Caravan, which can only mean one thing. We are here on episode 3 of our Adventures in Flames of War series. Now, it's been just over 2 weeks since my last video, so hands up how many people thought I'd found a new army, a new game system, or just lost interest altogether. No, we've been doing okay. I wanted to wait to put this video out until I actually had something to show you, and it's taken me a little while to get my infantry paint scheme up and running and to produce some results. But we have got some stuff to look at. So as we promised this week, we're going to go into that in a little detail. It's not going to be a tutorial. I don't think anyone's going to want to aim to achieve what I have got on my painted guys, but they're good enough for tabletop. I'm happy with them, which is great. So I will put up on screen now the paint scheme that I'm using, and you'll straight away notice it's not particularly quick, short and easy. I don't want to say I wanted to challenge myself with these. I wanted to come up with something that would be tabletop ready relatively quickly, and I have failed spectacularly with that. So this is it used to be about 18 steps with a few optional ones depending on what's up there. I've slimmed it down a little bit, so the model I'm going to show you in a few minutes was actually painted with a slightly more complicated version of this that I think is a bit unnecessary, so having finished it I've trimmed it out a little bit. But it's a lot of steps, and it's a mix of Games Workshop paints and Vallejo. So I've tried to use the recommended Vallejo paints that come in the D-Day British book to get things as accurate as I possibly can, but I've taken a bit of license with the models and painted them the way I want to paint them. I think they've turned out relatively well, and I'm pretty pleased with them. So pause the video there if for some reason you want to do this painstaking, takes weeks to produce a model and doesn't really look all that great paint scheme. But otherwise, let's roll on and see what we've produced. So I've finished my first infantry base. It's a 4-man Bren gun and rifle unit, and like I say, I'm quite happy with the way it's turned out, both in terms of the base, which I think is dark enough that the models still pop, and the models themselves, which from tabletop distance do look pretty good. In the photos, they're obviously a little bit messy and there are mistakes and all sorts because they are very, very small. But as you can see here, this is the unit that we've got. So I wanted to have a unit I could show you to show I have made some progress. So that is my 1 unit painted thus far this year, which is 1 unit more than I painted in the whole of last year. But the reason this video has taken just over 2 weeks is that when I last did a video, I talked about the fact that I had paint on a few other models, and I wanted to finish those. And that's what I've been pushing to do. So I was batch painting 6 bases, and we'll talk through what they are in a minute, but I thought if I do that, by the time I get to the end, I'll have a significant number of models done. And I have finished them, and I am very pleased with them as a group. However, I think in future 6 bases is a bit much for me for batch painting, because I very much ran out of steam after 10 days when I still wasn't seeing progress. One of the problems with this scheme is it looks terrible right up until you put the last wash on, and that's quite true of miniature painting sort of start to finish in any scale, in any format. But this is a real scheme where until you've got that last wash on to pick out the textures and pick out the surprisingly good detail actually on these Battlefront miniatures models, they really look very flat, very drab and quite amateurish. So they really only start to look good in the last probably half hour of what has possibly been 20 plus hours of work to make these 6 bases. So it's very difficult to maintain that momentum and maintain that motivation unless you're seeing results more quickly than that. But I have finished the following units. So first off, we've got the 4-man unit that we finished, but then I did the 2 command bases for the rifle platoons. So those are the smaller 3-man bases with the rifles on them. I did both of the Piat special weapons teams, So these are the Piats. I have got 2 more Piats which I can add in as an optional extra, but they're not on my list for playing against Martin, and I'm focused on getting that list painted first. And then finally, I finished my first unit, which is the HQ. It's the platoon or the company command, which are the Sten gun units. And you'll notice for these, particularly the one in the foreground, I've put red flowers on the base as well as some of the grass. And the reason I've done that, and I'm not convinced it looks as good as I thought it would. I think it's perhaps just a little bit off for the scale that we've got. But it really helps me at a quick pinch identify that company HQ, because the 2 bases have got 2 little red flower patches on them. So I'm going to keep them like that because it makes it easier for gaming purposes and it doesn't look terrible. So to finish off, let's pull them all together. What I've done here is a bit of a Heath Robinson job. I've made my own little rotating table to display them. Unfortunately, I tried to film them on the GoPro and the quality is not particularly good. So I'll flip that up now and you can watch them spin very stutteringly around an axis, but it gives you an idea of the amount of models I've painted. We've done, I think we've painted 20 men. And it turns out that painting one of those little 15mm guys takes me as long as painting a 28mm model. So to me, that's the equivalent of 20 Space Marines painted. That's what I'm telling myself in the space of the first month of the year. We've got quite a few more to do. So what I'm going to do next is I've moved straight into rounding out the platoons. So because we've done that one first base, we've got 4 of the 4-man bases for each platoon to finish. That's all. And I've done one of them already as my test model. So I'm now going to break the remaining 7 down into a batch of 3 and a batch of 4, and I'm treating myself to doing the batch of 3 next so I can see a bit of progress and get my first platoon done. So I'm hoping by the time we get to the next video I will have the first completed platoon ready to show you for the British paratroopers, and we've then 4 bases away from finishing the final platoon, and then we've just got 6 bases of mortars to get done so that we're finished with the infantry company. I've been revising my tank paint scheme as I go along with things that I've learned from painting these infantry models. Until I've done a test model for the tanks, I'm not sure it'll work, but I've slimmed it right down. So my tank paint scheme is now much more streamlined, and I think at this scale will be good enough. So I'm not as worried about churning out 9 Churchills and a few Stuarts in time for the game with Martin. The next big stepping stone after we've finished the infantry company, the parachute company, will be getting the 17-pounder guns done, because that's another large base with lots of infantry on it, and we've got a weapon as well which we've not tried yet. So we'll have a few more things to learn doing that. But as we progress, that's where we're going next. I've also potentially got a little test game in mind. A friend of mine said he would love to learn the system, so Mike, if you're watching, I will take you up on that offer and we will get a game in at some point. Not in the desperate future, because first off I need to build some Germans so that I've got another army that I can play against, and I don't want to distract myself too much from the British while I've got some momentum. But it would be nice to get a practice game in before the game with Martin at the start of March, so that I've got at least a vague idea of the rules. So that may be happening before the game with Martin in March, or it may happen just after that, when I'm on my Flames of War high and I'm desperate to paint all the stuff that I inevitably don't get done in time for the first game with Martin. But there we go. We have finished a significant number of infantrymen. The scheme now works. I'm getting a little bit quicker, a little bit better, and a little bit more accepting of simple mistakes, because the wash hides a lot of detail, and from tabletop distance they all look good. I'm still struggling to just let myself go and just whack a brush over them and paint by numbers, which I actually think wouldn't look much different. I've also changed the way I'm doing flesh tones for the next batch of models, because I've come up with a way that I think is a bit easier and won't look particularly any worse. We'll find out, because I'm going to do these 3 bases and they may look terrible, in which case I'll have to go back and redo them. But that has streamlined the process a bit. So catch me in the next one. Fingers crossed it won't be 2 weeks again this time, and fingers crossed we will have the first platoon complete. Thank you for joining the channel again. Goose out.